Hey, Lindsey Shaker, welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we are really excited to have you on here. I think you're our first belly dancer, which is really exciting to
Oh,
know that
yay, I'm first.
you are. So thank you for being our first belly dancer. So let's talk about that. So we actually been following you for a long time, and one of the things that we thought was really cool about you, and there are many things, but
Thank you.
we're always looking for unique folks, and we're always looking for diversity. And
Sure.
I think we've had some other dancers on our podcast before, and other types of visual artists, but we've never had a belly dancer on the podcast. So why don't you first share with us how you developed a passion for what you've become very well known for on Instagram.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's funny because so I'm half Lebanese and I'm half Irish. And I found personally that I found that there was like a little bit of a lacking of the touching with the culture. I think my family, when they came here, they were in that era of assimilation, and lost a lot. They didn't speak Arabic in the home. They only spoke it brother to sister, my grandfather and my great aunt. So during COVID, I was obviously very immunocompromised at that time. And I went into lockdown like as soon as there were whispers of COVID. And I just like left work and I was like, I'm sorry, but I gotta go. Like, I can't be here. So I was home like probably 2 weeks before everyone else was. And I needed some structure to my day to sort of wind off of work because if I would just keep working. So anyway, long story short, I started really kind of wanting to explore culture, but not only that, so with the tick-borne, I had some mobility loss. And one of the things that I'd started pre-COVID was IV immunoglobulin to help my immune system and help repair some of the damage that was done in my legs. And my balance was quite an issue, and that would come out in different ways. Like I would just randomly, like flop down or whatever. So I started IVIG, but I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to the gym regardless if it's COVID or not. So what would I do that can be fun, maybe culturally enhancing, and also help me with not just my mobility and my balance and my core and rebuilding all of the muscle, mass that I had lost bedridden because, I was tapped out for a while. So what can I do that also stimulates my brain? And one of my favorite things about belly dance is you are forced very uncomfortably to associate movement in your body and in a way that your brain would never, do naturally. So, one of the things that I really liked about it is okay, balance check, workout check, muscle building check, brain, brain function check. So and I found that they were writing about that over and over and over when I was looking it up online, about how that's part of it culturally too was that. So I was really excited to do all of these things in one. So the other reason that I'm really excited about it is that I actually stayed with it. I think one of the things that being quote unquote diagnosed, I don't like that word for some reason. I am like averse to the word diagnosed, but that's obviously what it is.
Well, we'll explore that. I want to explore that
All
with you.
right,
But let's,
yeah,
let's stay with the
sure,
belly
fair,
dancing.
fair, is uh being able, fair is being able to stay with a thing. I thought previously that I was just flighty. I thought that's like who I was. And it's not actually who I am. So I learned a lot about, being able to stay with something no matter what, even when it's really frustrating, when I would have previously just tapped out. So that's how I am still doing it.
So let's talk a little bit more about that because I think it's very interesting.
Okay.
Do you think you were defining yourself as being flighty because you were in fact flighty, or were you defining yourself as flighty because you were trying to find something that spoke to you, and when you found something that spoke to you and helped you to define yourself culturally, that that finding that place where you felt at home, that again, you weren't just sticking with something. This is just who you are, organic,
Yes, true,
genetically,
true.
culturally, is just who you are, and you just needed to find that place when you were an American. Now finding your cultural and spiritual roots.
So sure. I think I lost a lot of time. And in that time that I lost, being both neurologically tapped out, and so what I mean tapped out is I don't remember like probably a good 6 to 7 year, maybe even longer chunk of time. Like I just don't remember it. I remember it happened, but if you asked me, about so like, and these were like my 20s, I don't remember a chunk of time. So I think I wasn't developing as a human person in the way that people normally develop as a human person, and things that were symptoms became part of who I thought I was.
Okay. Okay.
And so realizing that that's not who I was, it is kind of a very sobering,
Oh,
but
so it was
also
actually it was the Lyme journey, not the cultural journey.
it was both. I mean, it was both because I didn't have that period of time. Those like, okay, I'm an adult now. Here's who I want to be based off of like these experiences. I don't remember really the experiences. So it was like, all right, let's like root myself back in both physically, mentally, culturally, of like, I need to make up for some time that I've lost and sort of learn who I am because I don't remember a lot of time.
Yeah. So you're in Connecticut now.
I'm in Connecticut,
Is that where you grew up? Are you a native of the state of Connecticut, or is that a place you moved to later in life?
born and raised in the greater Waterbury area. So it's like literally center left quadrant. If you if you made it into like a grid, it's like, so I'm mid state on the north, no, on the west side. So it's like smack dab in the middle. And born and raised. Yeah, I've been here my whole life.
What was the experience of what was it like growing up in Connecticut? I mean, what was your life like?
My life.
You
My life.
have this multicultural experience, right? With with both Middle Eastern and European descendants.
Sure.
You're growing
Sure.
up in America. I guess you were second generation, right? It sounds
So
like
I'm
you're second
actually, so
generation.
my grandfather came here from Lebanon when he was younger-ish. He was, younger. I mean, it was 1930 when they came over. So my dad was born here, and his siblings, but my grandfather was born in Lebanon and came here. They started my great grandfather started it was a gas station shop, like a little body shop in Waterbury. And that's basically where it all started. That grew, it became an automotive dealership, and then that turned into franchise retail dealerships, and now I'm fourth generation in automotive. So I work with my dad and my cousins and my brother, which is a blessing, and I do marketing there. So my life has been, I mean, it's been good. It's been good. I try not. My childhood was wonderful. My brother and my sister are 8 and 10 years younger than me. So I'm like their parent sibling.
Quasi-parent,
And
yeah.
right. And I love that. I just cherish that so much. And we always have each other's back, which is great. I have four. My parents were divorced, my both remarried, so I have four wonderful parents. My stepmom and my stepdad are wonderful. I've known them both most of my life. So it's been interesting. I started in actually, after college, I went and I interned a paid internship, then turned contractor at a pharmaceutical company in Connecticut where I worked in medical affairs on like the medical side of the whole operation. So that was really fun. Then um I decided to do the one thing that I never was going to do is come and be a part of the family
All right.
business.
So you grew up in this entrepreneurial environment, right? You were the child and grandchild of these business entrepreneurs. So
Yeah.
what was that experience like? I mean, what was it like to be around self-employed people, and people who knew how to create their own economy, and I'm assuming wanted to teach their daughter and granddaughter how to create her own economy.
So great question. Yeah. So my 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 grandfather, like a lot of like first or second generation born came over here sort of people. He was a little scary, but he was scary with like lots of love. Um he was a very loving, like really wonderful human person, but he had that like, you know, I'll never forget one time I walked in, I was living with my grandparents at one point, and I was in sales. I was selling Fords at the time, Fords and Lincolns. And I walked in after a full day, and he's sitting at the big dining room table at the end, and he has like soup. And I sit down and I'm like, totally tired after like a huge day. And he goes, "What'd you do today?" And I was like, I told him I don't remember how many it was, cars sold. And he said, "Where were you weak?" And and I sat there, I was so mad for like 10 seconds. And then I was like, "Oh, huh, huh, okay, where was I weak?" So like it sort of was like that, like
Yeah.
full of love, but also like, there's a lot of other things like, you want to do your absolute best because you don't want to be the one that, everyone has to like make excuses for. So, there's a lot of like competing with who? Nobody but your perception. But it's been really amazing. I've learned tenacity is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. No matter we've had in Waterbury, there was a flood in 55, wiped us out, wiped everybody. I mean, wiped, the whole mid-state out. Like businesses did not recover. Before that, Waterbury was the brass center of the world, like, and Waterbury never recovered from that flood. But we did, like we recovered. They built with their hands and cement and, bricks, a second floor, to alleviate for the future, for future loss, so they were tenacious no matter what. There was
Resourceful people.
Yes. So like I'm very grateful for that because I'll have a bad day, but it will not be a bad life. Like it will just be that day, period, end stop, move forward.
Well, Lindsay, I think one of the things that's really powerful about your experience is that I think those of us who did not grow up in an entrepreneurial environment do not know how to create our own economy. And although I was raised by very loving people, uh,
Sure.
they worked for other people, and I never knew anyone who owned or developed their own business.
Sure.
And of course, we were taught that if we went to school and we worked hard and we secured a certain level of professional status, that we would always be able to take care of ourselves. And the truth is, that's a lie, right? We're not educated. We're not educated to create our own economy. I'd argue we're educated to be good employees,
100%.
and quite frankly, I think we're educated into bondage, as opposed to you, because of the familial environment that you had. No matter what happened, Lindsay was going to be okay. She would always know how to build her own personal economy. Lindsay would always have the resources she needed. And most importantly, Lindsey was taught how to be resourceful. And we're going to talk about that as we get later into the podcast.
Sure.
But one of the things that we've observed here at Tick Boot Camp is that so many people struggle with overcoming their Lyme challenges because they believe that it's resources that will allow them to be successful in their healing journey rather than resourcefulness.
Mm,
And because almost
yeah.
all of us, and me included, I have a doctor of law degree, right? I'm a Juris Doctor. I didn't have my own economy. I didn't know how to create my own economy. And as a result, like so many of our followers and so many of the folks that we've interacted with, we believe that because we don't have resources and because we're sick, we can't work for other people, that we're not going to be able to heal. And what we've observed is people like you who have been taught through their family experience how to create their own economy. They don't have that hurdle and they have a shorter healing journey. But I think even more importantly, what entrepreneurship teaches you is resourcefulness. And that's really what causes people to be successful on a Lyme disease journey. So talk to me about your experience as a child of entrepreneurs and a grandchild of entrepreneurs, and how not only having the ability, knowing that no matter what happens, you will always know how to make money and always be able to provide for the care that you needed. But in addition to that, how you come from this really salty group of people who built a flooded business up from the ground with
Right.
their hands, how that ultimately served you on your healing journey.
Sure. So I think one of the things that, people that have worked really hard and have operated a business and they've done it successfully, they have as parents, and I'm watching my dad, I think they have a struggle. And the struggle is, do I satiate this child because I can, or do I teach her how to, be better? And I think he struggles or has struggled with that. He's a wonderful human being and he's a great dad. But I think that, there's always that challenge I've watched as a parent, as a child of, amazing people, that I've always been so afraid to not be, some type of way that I just work hard. Whether it's, I'll just work and work and work. I'll just work hard. And I think that that sort of grit, whether it's maybe not monetarily always, but it's that grit that has made it so that I didn't even consider, you know, I I mean, through the journey, like I didn't even consider an alternative of not completing this process. It wasn't even a possibility. There have been really bad days, it got worse, way worse before it got better, but there was never an option of not finishing. And I can't take all the credit, by any means. I had a lot of support in my mom was a cheerleader. Like she rallied. I don't know that if I know I'm tenacious and I know I'm gritty, but without having a cheerleader like that, saying like, we are going to do this, we are going to do this, and take your meds, take your meds, take your meds, but like, so I don't know that I would have been the same outcome, but I am tenacious. So, I think that, the other thing I think is nuts is that like, I was so afraid to not perform in my role that that I, in retrospect, I was like, I probably should have like maybe taken some time off. But
I don't know,
on the
Lindsey.
flip,
I don't know.
like if I did, am I giving into that mentality? Like, so for me, I didn't even consider it. It wasn't even a thought. Like, am I lucky that I was able to, do some work from home, have this support network? Yeah, I am, of course, but it wasn't even an option. It wasn't even a consideration. I just had to get through it.
Right. That's why I love the story about your grandfather, right? You're coming in and thinking you've had a good day at work and you're really proud of yourself and you sold all kinds of cars and you've done everything you're supposed to do. And your grandfather's like, all right, well, look, but we improve every day,
Yeah,
right?
but like
We
yeah,
as entrepreneurs, we're on this, we're on a personal development journey, and every single day has to be better than the day before. So, all right, granddaughter, I'm really happy while I'm eating my soup to hear that you're doing well. But what are you going to do better tomorrow, right? And that's again, and
100%.
I think that's also a really powerful metaphor for the Lyme journey, right? It's one day at a time, doing a little bit better than you did the day before, because if you do it too aggressively, you can make yourself sicker. And again, we're going to spend more time talking about that too. So let's go back to,
100%.
I want to spend a little bit more time with you in your childhood, right? You grew up in the
Yep,
Lyme Belt, right? You grew up in the state of Lyme, Connecticut, right?
right
So,
here.
so what did you know about Lyme disease as a child?
As a child, I distinctly remember, two specific, I have two specific memories. Like I knew ticks were a thing. I knew ticks were dangerous. I knew ticks caused a disease, as I grew up. Like I remember finding one being young, real young, and knowing that was bad. Oh heck, like, and I remember my dad, I was at my dad's and I found, I think I was rocking in a chair, right? In a wooden chair, and I felt it was embedded, and I felt it against the chair, and I remember being like, uh-oh. And then I remember my dad being like, uh-oh. And then so I remember that being bad. And then I remember I found another one, a teeny, 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 tiny, but it was tiny and it was in my belly button and it was stuck. And I remember my mom being like, uh-oh. And then, subsequently from that day, I was probably, I don't know, I might have been at that point either in fifth or sixth grade, fourth, fifth or sixth grade ish. And it was, she did things like there were actions that she took to, after that, my mom's a holistic practitioner. She is actually a nutritionist, and she actually works closely with my doctor now. They have a great little thing going because they work so well together. So I remember taking this half correct Lyme test, whichever one the doctor gave. I had a good pediatrician, but still. And then I remember taking drops, some sort. I don't remember what kind of drops that I had under my tongue that she insisted upon, but I remember doing that. And then I remember her being very mindful about, watching and seeing how this goes. So, like, I remember it being a concern. I had no idea. Even before, even BL or BD or before diagnosis, I think even I was deluded to think that Lyme disease proper, so, that term Lyme disease, without considering the co-infections, was, oh, you're sore, you're like, and my dad was sick, he was ported. And I remember being like, oh, but he's like, the same, get up and go, get up and go, get up and go. I'm also a firefighter. Let's go fight fires. Thinking that he didn't feel it, like, so he's fine, right? And so there was a lot of that. I think I was even here in Connecticut deluded to think that it wasn't as bad as a thing. I mean, which I really hate admitting, but I'm going to admit it.
So, Lindsay, now we've talked a lot about your family, right? You come from a very close family, four very good people who care about you and love you and showed you a lot of love and support. So I appreciate the cultural support you got and the cultural education you got. But what I'm wondering about is what kind of formal education you got as a student in Connecticut. Was Lyme disease something you talked about in your health classes or your gym classes, or what was that experience like, when you're in the shadows of Lyme, Connecticut?
It's a great question because nothing, not like, so I went to a Montessori school, and it's funny that you just said that because that now I'm thinking I went to Montessori, we were outside doing stuff a lot, right? There was never okay, let's check for ticks, or I remember being at a camp, for example, where, like you learn about nature. I remember the smell of, off, but nobody was like, okay, now let's check for ticks. School, recess. Okay, let's check for ticks. Where now that's something that I talk about a lot is, oh, you were outside doing your lawn. Okay, let's check for ticks. So there was none of it in as far as formal education at all, period, nothing.
So now let's move forward with the development of your symptoms. So you shared with us that there were at least two occasions where you recall a tick being on you. One when you feel this engorged tick on your back and it presses against the rocking chair,
Yep,
and another small tick that you find in your belly button.
yep.
Do you recall any other tick bites? Because I'm
I
sure
don't
there've been many other times, but weren't finding them because you weren't checking. But any other that you recall having found?
I don't recall one. I recall I found one that I can recall at the nape of my neck and one like at my hairline. It was not attached. But other than that, those are the two vibrant memories that I have of an attached tick. Those are the two very, that I recall like off the top of my cranium.
So when did your symptoms begin to develop? Not, and again, not, I want you to look back.
Yeah.
When do you believe the symptoms that you now know to be your Lyme disease symptoms, when did they begin to present?
Sure. Distinctly, tangibly in high school. I was a sprinter. I did the 200-meter race. And at this point, I was a junior and I was like, you know, probably going to be pretty darn competitive in the 200-meter race. I had like broken all of my, you know, good times, and it was like looking like I was going to be super competitive. And I was in practice rounding the track, and my entire physicality just froze at mid sprint. And it's like so surreal to think like it just stopped. I didn't have it just came to a halt. And, I remember vividly the trainer at the time at the high school that I was at I remember him thinking that on his face, he thought I wanted to get out of practice. All I wanted to do was take this race. Like I was so close to that being my race for the year by the time that spring came around. And he, you know, oh, get in the ice bath, it's something silly, something like that. And I can see it, even my coaches being like, okay, yeah, sure, Lindsey. And it didn't happen always, but I can picture where I was when it happened. And so I distinctly remember that without any explanation. It didn't happen
Okay,
all the
give me some
time.
more detail. What you literally couldn't move?
Couldn't move.
You
Like
were
to
frozen.
a mid sprint around the corner, and I'm taking that straightaway, and my body like seized, like it stopped short.
You were
And
paralyzed.
I remember, like, I can't remember how I came out of that, but I remember physically not being able to even finish. And then I was able to jog at the end. I don't know how much time went by between the seizing of my body and like being able to not being able to move forward, and then like walking or jogging, but I don't know how much time passed, but I remember not sprinting, and then them thinking that I was just trying to go up to the trainer.
How long was the paralysis experience from the second tick bite that you recall?
7 years ish. Now, so, and I hope I'm not getting too far ahead of myself, but we find out much later that my mom had two Lyme and Bartonella when she had me.
Okay.
So when she finally was diagnosed, and you know, through a lot of grief, obviously. And, you know, people being like, I don't, you know, she had a lot of weird symptoms for someone who puts everything that she does for her body is for her body, for her output, for her health, you know, like eating supplements, like she's the epitome of health. She's active. Her symptoms were weird. She ends up at an immunologist and he was like, hey, do you have a daughter or do you have a child? You know, and she was like, yeah. And he was like, you might want to get her tested. So I
Is that
think,
how you were diagnosed?
yeah,
Oh, from that second test. All right, so let's pause there for a second because
sure.
I want to build out up to that point.
Okay.
Um, so how do your symptoms develop from the time that you had the paralysis experience up until the time you're diagnosed?
Second most notable that I can recall is depression. I was under the impression that I had major depressive disorder, you know, like all signs pointed to that's, you know, and it was just debilitating depression. It started around then, around, you know, junior, senior year, maybe even sophomore, but around then. And then I was having a harder time. I could definitely remember having a harder time in school, focusing. You know, it wasn't as overt as later, but it was. I found it significant. You know, a little bit harder with my memory, but mood wise was probably the biggest change at that point. And then I started getting a little bit of a temper, so maybe there was so like a mood regulation or like a emotion regulation aspect of it. In college, I had a little bit of a kind of a bad temper, and then very clear. So then it started getting progressively worse. Like so, my brain was worse, my depression was worse. I finally started antidepressants.
Can we talk about, and I do want to explore all of those pieces with you, but
Sure,
I want to come back to the bit of a temper that
sure.
you shared with us, right? So, you know, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about at Tick Boot Camp recently is Lyme rage, right? Or Bart rage, right? And we actually posted on our Instagram an image of the young man who was arrested in New York City for assassinating the United Healthcare CEO. And we put up a picture of you know his angry face when he was being brought into the courthouse in Pennsylvania, and we asked a question, Lyme rage, question mark, right? And I can't tell you how angry many of our followers on Instagram um, became as a result of us asking that question, right? Because
Yep.
you know we like to talk about Lyme disease generally. We like to talk about the symptoms generally. We like to acknowledge that there are ugly pieces of Lyme disease. But when it comes to talking about Lyme rage, that's when all of the triggers seem to be set off, and even long-term followers were attacking us to the point where I had to shut it down because it was starting to get a little bit more challenging than we thought was
Than you
healthy.
wanted, than you intended.
Yeah,
Can I tell
yeah.
you, I the second that it happened, the second that that incident happened, as it was reported, I knew, I knew I knew why. I knew exactly why. There was no other explanation to me than that kid had a tick-borne illness. I knew it, like in my gut. There's nothing else that explains it. People don't like to talk about Lyme rage or Bart rage. I think because it's so intangible and not always, you know, like I remember being like, why am I acting like this? Why am I so mad? And it was blinding. I mean, blinding. I mean, my roommates in college named her, you know, I had an alter ego named Natasha. It was overt.
So
And it
Lindsay,
was,
when you were raging,
yeah,
was there just give us an explanation of what it was like?
sure.
Was there some event that wouldn't necessarily require the type of response that you were giving, or was it just organically sort of coming out of you like an exorcist, and there really was no triggering. What was it?
I think I honestly think that there wasn't a like uh nothing that could have happened would warrant that response, but I remember being very irritable and things like just like driving me crazy, and then I would act out. Um especially against my roommates. There was a there was a I came back to my my apartment one day, and they were all, we need to talk to you. You know, they're like sitting in my room and they're like, we need to talk to you about something. And I was like, oh. And they were talking to me about my anger and my, the way that I react totally unwarranted, totally unnecessarily to, and it was a lot of irritability, but it was a lot of like explosivity that just wasn't necessary. And I remember being like, yeah, I don't know why I'm doing this. It was so frustrating.
Is that what you said to them? Like, I don't know why it's happening?
Yes. Yeah. I was like, and I didn't even realize that it was like enough for, an intervention. Like I didn't even realize that it was like that. And then I was like, when we were all talking, I felt so guilty because started looking back and I was like, oh my God, it can't just be them, that like obviously that there's something wrong here. And then I started thinking like, wow, I have been hot, a lot hotter, or, pin trigger angry for what? Like there's no inciting incident. And
So, Lindsay, what
yeah.
would your rage look like? Like, what was it yelling? Was it screaming? Were there any physical actions like hitting or pushing? Or, I mean, what did it look like?
So there were a couple of incidents, altercations. But one thing that I would get really angry about inexplicably, and maybe not inexplicably, but and maybe this was an excuse. It honestly could be. I might have been justifying it. Was my anger came out full tilt in defense of somebody else. So if there was a situation that had nothing to do, maybe with my friend, if my friend, like if a girl was being mean to my friend or like something like that, like my response to that was not normal. So it looked like me getting belligerent, like in whether words or pointing or, people having to like, hey, Lens, and I can't even fathom being like that. That's just not who I am, like at all. So but like didn't realize that like that was sort of a progression. I was like, uh, I thought at the time, so I had a really weird immune response that warranted poison ivy, so I needed steroids. I thought that like this is residual roid rage. And like no, that wasn't it. But that went on for some years, and then I realized like what am I being like that for? And it organically stopped. So
So, Lindsay, look, I mean, we know that steroids are immunosuppressive, and we've had many of our followers be diagnosed, for example, with a skin infection, for example, or a skin rash where they were given steroids as a treatment for what had been a Lyme rash, but misdiagnosed as a different type of rash. And because of the immunosuppressive nature of the steroids, it actually
sure,
caused their Lyme symptoms to take off.
sure.
I'm just wondering whether or not that was an element of what was happening with you, where there really was a connection between the steroids and the rage. It wasn't just direct. It was not the direct connection you're.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's plausible. I mean, I acted out for like a while, like for a inexplicable amount of time for nothing. And then I actually, that was the catalyst to go to therapy. And so at that point, and I had gone to therapy before, but I started looking at antidepressants, but I didn't want to do that yet. Like I tried 5-HTP. So at that point, I realized there was a mood factor here, that I really needed to mend. And whether it was, at one point I thought bipolar wasn't a possibility, because of that cycle of, red hot, tired, like that sort of fluctuation, red hot, tired, don't want to socialize. That's when I started to consider, all right, maybe I need to fix this.
Yeah, I mean, look, you had a lot of signals from folks that cared about you that were suggesting to you that maybe you needed some help, right? I mean,
100%.
these
100%.
these interventions are not something people want to participate in. It's very difficult to get up the courage to intervene in the lives of people that we care about. And so you got the signal, you got
I was like, okay, fair.
so tell me what your therapeutic experience was like. What type of therapy did you seek? And as a subset to that question, by the way, were you going to college in Connecticut as well, or did
I
you?
was in Rhode Island
Okay.
I went to Roger Williams in Rhode Island.
You're
So at the
still you're
time I
still,
was
still in the line belt.
still
Uh,
in the line belt.
okay.
Most of my, most of everyone, my roommates were either from Connecticut and Long Island. So I, still in the belt, still in the thick of it. And so that looked like, when I graduated, so this was like, I don't remember. I might have, timing is weird and I don't remember a lot, but so I had graduated. I found a wonderful therapist who also had like a working relationship with a incredible psychiatrist. One of the things that I was concerned about was back then, I liked my brain. My brain was unique. My brain was good. I didn't want that to be messed with, but I trusted this guy. His background was in like pharmacokinetics, like his background was in the chemistry of the body and the drug. So I trusted them as a team. I wouldn't have done one without the other. So one was like, the standard cognitive behavior therapy. And then, so I started on an antidepressant plus a mood stabilizer for a very short stint. We talked through a lot of my symptoms, and he was like, had a good gut for, you don't need to be on a mood stabilizer forever. I think you need to sort of reset back. And I was like, okay. So for about 3 months, I was on a mood stabilizer, and then I was on just an antidepressant. I am still on said antidepressant.
Okay. So, and one of the things that our listeners are aware of is we've interviewed a number of different Lyme literate psychologists and psychiatrists. And I went down to the ILADS conference in Texas, and I interviewed 61 different experts, many of whom were either psychologists or psychiatrists. And one of our favorite people in this community is Dr. Leo Shay, who we've interviewed a couple of times. So we're going to
Okay.
be doing another episode with Dr. Shay, who's one of the top Lyme literate psychologists in the world. And one of the things that Dr. Shay taught us is that every psychological symptom has a physiological foundation. And the question that I always ask folks who have been on the journey like yours is, did your psychologist and psychiatrist um, put you through a physical exam so that they could determine what the physiological foundation was of the mood and other emotional challenges you were dealing with before they prescribed pharmacological tools?
In the line belt, no. No, they didn't. And it's funny because I sort of had to face this whole realization of being a like avid mental health advocate and very, very vocal about my depression, to realizing that, oh my God, I was just sick. That wasn't that. I didn't have depression, but I was, a stoic mental health advocate of like, It's crazy to think about. But in retrospect, and the plan is now to be able to titrate down, it now that my journey is progressed. But no, they didn't do that. In fact, you know, um, no.
So Lindsay, and I'm only asking that question because I do think as a default in the line belt, at the very least in the line belt, I think it should be, nationally and internationally, but at the very least, if you've grown up on Long Island, you've grown up in Connecticut, you've grown up in Rhode Island, you've grown up, one of the Massachusetts, you're grown up in one of these states where you're getting bitten by ticks all the time, right?
Right.
And you have these,
This progression of symptoms.
right, yeah, right, and which in part should include an analysis of rage, that at the very least you would think all these mental health professionals would say, as part of our diagnostic protocol for determining what your mental health challenges are, we're going to send you for Lyme disease testing, right?
Right.
And we know Lyme disease testing sucks, and we know that the specialties might
Sucks.
do a better job, but at least it should be on the radar of mental health professionals to at least consider it as part of the process. And it sounds to me, despite growing up in Connecticut, despite being bitten by ticks many more times than you even know, despite having what sounds to be like very classic Lyme disease symptoms, that you
Sure.
went to mental health professionals who, by the way, you hold in high regard. So
I did. I still
and
do.
you still do, no, I
And
know, but they,
and
but they didn't.
to be fair, like, part of it was I think I was self-medicating a little bit, which I was very transparent about. So I think, but no, but like, so I think that's where his brain went, but no, regardless of all that, like maybe in addition to,
Right,
but
Lindsay.
like
Yeah. And,
the,
and look, and sometimes, we have to be careful. It's rarely one bug, one
oh,
illness, right? I mean, we are complex beings, right? And
right,
one of the things that, again, another one of my favorite, I love Dr. Rosalie Greenberg. She's just an awesome, brilliant psychiatrist, right? And she and I were having a conversation very much like the one that you and I are having. And, and I was kind of pushing her on, how do you taper people off of these different drugs? And she said, hold on, Rich, some people need to taper off, some people don't, like,
sure,
the goal is to make sure that people are having a good experience. So, there's nothing wrong with medication. There's nothing wrong with taking proper pharmacological tools for the proper person. And in some
right,
cases, we have these, the multi causes for whatever is resulting in these difficult symptoms, and we have
sure,
to figure out how to layer solutions in the same way that we're layering the problems, right? So
100%,
there's nothing wrong with using the right tool for the right problem. my my
100%.
my concern with this portion of our conversation is, it seems to me that you had an opportunity to be diagnosed with Lyme disease substantially earlier than you were.
Way.
And when you went to doctors in a community that should know better, they didn't send you for testing.
No, it gets worse.
Well, please share.
So around that time, a little later, same era, I started developing some very strange, like very concerning symptoms inexplicably. Like, and none of them made sense. Now, at the time, I was in New Canaan, Connecticut. Your healthcare can't be better, right? Like you're with like your access to healthcare is pretty profound. You've got resources. I had and my mom and I, so I was actually on my coming off of my second intervention. my my mom, and thank God, she knew something was wrong. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what. So she and I keep asking her, like, what specifically. She was like, I don't know how to explain it beyond, like, it was you weren't right. She knew something was wrong. She knew something was wrong. She knew something was wrong, but she just thought it was something else. So which, and like we joke about it now. At the time, I was pretty pissed, but we joke about it now because thank God she was wrong about what was wrong, but she was right. Something was wrong, which pushed her to keep at it, to keep at. She knew something was wrong. So coming off of my,
Your mother has a healing spirit too, right?
she has a healing spirit. She knew. She was like, you just weren't, you lost that thing. And I was like, what does that mean? She was like, I don't know how to explain it, but I knew something was wrong. So I remember I was outside, I was about to leave, and I was wearing like a little dress. It was summertime, and I was developing not bruises. These were like hematomas. Like literally, they weren't bruises. They were purple. I mean, purple. And it covered 80% of my body. In retrospect, that's sort of concerning, right? But so in addition to that, I had petechia, which, pinpoint bruising all over my body, especially like here. And I had a systemic itch that there wasn't a rash, there was no rash. My ears were itchy, everything was itchy everywhere. There was nothing, visible. I mean, aside from the hematomas. And I had a really bad headache. And my mom saw my legs, and she was like, like so taken aback, because they were, I mean, they were bad. It was bad. It was bad. And she was like, we were in a fight, and she was like, Lindsey, what? And then she like lifted up, and I was covered. And she was like, no, you're on birth control. You're covered in, you could have a stroke. Like we need to go to the hospital. Like you're bleeding under your skin. And I begrudgingly went, because I think I knew she was right. It didn't make sense. I was Googling, because it was bad. And what Google told me was not good. Those combination of symptoms, it's not good. And so we go to the hospital, and we're in the ER in the Gold Coast of Connecticut. And when I tell you, I could see the concern on everybody's face. I could see the concern on everybody's face. Like I knew that I knew something was, I knew it was bad. And, one by one, they introduced, they would walk in, and they were the specialist of the department. Endo, they went through the nephrologist, everybody. They all did different tests, CT scan, I mean, everything. With dye, without dye, and at that point I was really freaked out. And we were there for hours. And then ultimately the ER head came down straight out of Dr. House. And she said, we all just sat in a room, and we don't know what to do. We were going to admit you, but we don't know what we would do. Like you're concerning, but we don't know what we would do. We can't just keep you just because you're concerning. We don't know what we would test you for. So they made appointments for me to go to the cancer center and to go to an endocrinologist. So they made those 2 appointments. I recently actually uncovered those test results, which gets interesting. But I was so concerned about having a blood cancer, which all things considered sort of looked like it might be. And those tests came back. I didn't have cancer. I did not follow up on it was either an immunologist or an endocrinologist, but I did not follow up on that, which became very common of things that I did. I became very not follow-up worthy. So they did test me for Lyme. I found those records not that long ago. It was the last 3 pages. I was inconclusive. They did not point that out. They did not say, and this drives me crazy, so because they did not say, we tested you for, we have this file. And I don't even think they gave us the file. I called for the file. So the last pages in order are, the Western, whatever test it was, whether it was probably the Western blot test, and it was inconclusive. And that was the closest that I've ever tested to positive for that test. And then, So that was pretty wild. That was concerning, physicality wise.
So how do things develop from there? And what's the timeline between that now second intervention and this experience where you have all these wild symptoms, but you're not testing positive for anything, right? I mean, that's another one of the very typical experiences that folks in the Lyme disease community have. My co-host Matt often talks about how the nurse who was treating him during one of his experiences after, I think after a seizure, was, "Hey, we did the $1 million workup and there's nothing wrong with you." Right. So, I mean, so we keep seeing that present itself over and over and over again, where people are very, very sick,
So sick.
and all of the testing from the $1 million workup come back negative. Why they're not thinking Lyme at that point, although I guess your folks did because they did test you, right? So
I guess they didn't even bring it up, or so then a lot of the cognition aspects and the neurological aspects started to progress from that point, but insidious and slow. So that's when I started to sort of develop, oh, and exhaustion. And when I mean exhaustion, I mean like, you know, I would almost sort of like, if I wasn't falling asleep, like it was almost narcoleptic, sort of like couldn't get enough sleep, could sleep at any time. Um, the problem was, is I thought everyone felt like that, as like I thought everyone felt like that. There's I don't know if you follow Gary V. He's like, like a marketer, right? So
I know Gary Vaynerchuk is,
so
yeah.
like I love Gary V, and I followed Gary V for years, and I would watch these videos. Like I can remember every time I watch, I'd be like, I don't get it. I don't understand how he has that, how he has this, you know, I'm exhausted. I don't have this energy. I don't have this like emotional energy. So that started progressing. And so word recall, memory, attention deficit. And then my mom, so there was 5 years, no, more, 6 years probably. My mom got tested, no, maybe 5 years. There are 5 years between the second intervention with that ended awkwardly, but to my mom getting tested, which was which was sort of the catalyst for me being tested. So there was that period, and in that period, it was very neurological and cognition that was deeply affected. Avoidance mode, I didn't open mail at all. Lost my license. Like, didn't pay anything, nothing, couldn't even fathom wrapping my head around these like very simple, quote, air quote, things. And I couldn't figure out why. I drove myself crazy, and because those were like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand why I was acting like this. Why am I being like so, why can't I? Why? So there was about 5 years between those two periods of time.
Were you able to work in that window, or did there come a time where you crashed and were unable to go to work?
I worked all the way through at the point of when I went to the hospital. I was living with my mom, at home with my mom, and I was at the pharmaceutical company. By the time my mom got tested, I think at that point I was at home with my dad, and maybe either still at the pharmaceutical company or just started in the family business. But I was working. I just like I would leave, and like sleep in my car. Uh just to get that, I fell asleep, anywhere. I needed to just tap out. But I was working, I was very like, you need to do this and you need to do it well. You need to do this and you need to do it well. You need to do this part and you need to do it well. Just this.
So the I guess the only stable part of your life was your work life.
Yeah, it was that I could do my job, and I was good at my job. Like it was, I only had enough for that. Looking back, that's it. I would go to work, I would end up in bed. I would go to work, I would end up in bed. I would go to work, I would end up in bed. And period, and stop.
So tell us about the call you got from your mother when she shared with you that she was tested for Lyme disease, and it was recommended that you get tested for Lyme disease. And did she tell you why she was tested?
Yes. So I knew that she was experiencing some very concerning, inexplicable symptoms. She's fit, she's a competitive tennis player, but she puts food in her body for her health. She doesn't eat crap, and um her blood pressure was, 210 over 90, like it for someone who has perfect health, but the thing was, she would see a cardiologist, do all the tests, the stress test, this test, the imaging, the structures, fine, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. No explanation for that, blood pressure. Then and then she started developing out of nowhere an anaphylaxis to food, tree nuts, um, violently. And it started getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then she ended up in the ICU. Her third cardiologist, if I'm not mistaken, her either second or third cardiologist was like, I don't get it. Like this doesn't make sense, but I have a guy. And she referred my mom to the immunologist. She was tested Igenix and Galaxy maybe, or one or the other, and boom, Lyme and Bartonella. And he had mentioned, he was like, hey, it looks like you've had this for like a really long time. And this was right before that they started actually publishing that, maternal Lyme is a thing. So, but he was like, asking questions about me, and then she made the appointment. Like I had no option. She knew, she knew. So she made the appointment. She was like, Lindsey, you're coming with me. She called my dad, and she was like, Lindsey's taking this day off. Like there was no option. Go in for testing, meet with him. And at the time, I was like, why am I here? Like, but this is so ridiculous. Everyone feels like this. I'm fine. What do you mean? Um, and I'll never forget it, but they were taking my blood. I passed out, like lost time. And, like it was just another one of those, like, you're not okay. So, a couple weeks go by. And I think he had a pretty good idea of what he wanted to test for. What we did not expect, I swear to you, I'll never forget his face when he's going through the results. I'll never forget it because he honestly looked rattled. And he looked like he was trying to not be rattled as he's like thumbing through it. And
That'd
I
be
I
cool.
I joke about it with him now, and he admits this, So we expected maybe Lyme, maybe Bartonella. We did not expect the 5 other co-infections, a total of, Lyme plus Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Bartonella. We maybe expected babesiosis and ehrlichiosis and typhus. Who has that? So we did not expect all of those. And as he's reading them through, and the reality is starting to hit me of like, yeah, you do feel like crap, Lindsey, and I'm, stiff lip for a second. And I'm like, but because it's soaking in, like, you've kind of been pretending, I think, this whole time that you're okay, and you're not okay. But here's why you're not okay, Lindsey. And so we come up with a battle plan, and we leave the office, and as she's paying, I lost it. Like I just lost it. And it was like, I knew at this point she'd been treated for like 2 years, and she was on the end, or maybe a year. She was on the second half, the last leg of her journey. And I remember thinking, all right, well, I'm at least 2 years out, maybe 4. Let's call it 4.
So was it the concern about the length of treatment that caused you to have the meltdown, or was it just overwhelmed by having all of the experiences that you had from the past and not having an answer for them? I mean, what was the rush of emotion triggered by?
It it was there was an explanation. There was a reason for all of this, for every single last thing. Like people don't feel like this. Like you've sort of like gaslit yourself to think that what you feel is normal, what you feel is not normal. And so it was sort of like almost validating, but like, okay, I don't have to feel like this. Like, so it was sort of both relief, sad for, letting it become this, going through this like many years of decline. But hope, knowing that I was in good hands. It was like this cacophony of like a realization that like, holy heck, this is, and then I'm calculating in my brain, I'm thinking like, okay, I was 28 at the time, I think. Got it. So, I think I am. So I'm calculating in my head, best worst case, and I'm thinking through that. And I mean, it's been 10 years. So, but but I just got my labs back. And I have outdone everything, all of them, except for the last little of Bartonella. Bartonella it's a it is a rude, rude perpetrator.
Yeah, it's it is a nasty bacteria. It is really really nasty. And
It's so it
you know,
really wants to stay.
I mean, but part of it is, Lindsay, you were probably infected over and over and over again, right? I mean, it sounds logical, we don't know, but it sounds logical that you are probably, congenitally infected.
Sure,
Which your mom was a Connecticut gal. She was
she
probably
was.
bitten by ticks many times. You were likely bathing in the bugs from the minute you were conceived, right? So I think that's true.
Right.
But you were also bitten repeatedly, and each time you
Sure.
were bitten, there were a different combination of bugs being spit into you.
Yep.
And what happens is they all sort of colonize together, and they overwhelm our immune system, and then we're in a bad place, right? And that's what happened to you. I think it's likely to have been a combination of both congenital
I
um,
agree.
and
Yeah,
tick
I
bite,
agree.
multiple tick bites, right? But the other thing we have to be concerned about with Bartonella is that we can get Bartonella from other places, right? Bartonella is an insidious bacteria. Many people get from tick bites.
Sure.
But we interviewed the founder of Galaxy Labs, Professor, I always butcher his name, Brightwort. And I know I apologize, Professor, for butchering your name. I always do. I even
We
did.
love you.
He he shared with me at the IGenics conference that Bartonella is very very easy to contract from flea bites,
Yep.
and of course it's known as cat scratch
Cat
fever.
scratch
And
fever.
I never understood how that worked. And what he shared with me during that interview, which we're going to be releasing in the near future, is that what happens is when the fleas defecate, there is live Bartonella in the flea poop. And what happens is the cats get it on their claws, and then when the cats, even when they're kneading you, what they're doing is they're actually injecting Bartonella into your body. So one of the challenges with Bartonella is we get reinfected over and over and over again. It could be a tick bite, it could be a flea bite, it could be a cat not scratching you, but just having it on their nails and just how they need you. Or so Bartonella is it's more insidious than I think we know. More people have it than and
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
and
Oh,
I
yeah.
think you're probably more aware of it because you're testing all the time for the various strains. But I think the percentage of the population that has Bartonella is huge.
I think and I say that when I started to realize, I'm like, if I'm, walking around with 7 tick-borne illnesses, I mean, what, like, it, it's gotta be astronomical. And I see it, over and over again, just, I have a lot of friends that have all these things, inexplicably over time. And I'm like, God, what I would be able to do with an unlimited fund, like to just take care, like, can somebody test her? Like, because I think if it's not 100%, and this is like a very bold statement, but if it's not 100% of the population, like, I think it's 90. Like, it has to be a huge number.
All right, so which of course does beg the question, do we need to clear all the bugs from our system, or do we just have to enhance our immune system so that we can manage these bugs? Because I think most people who have the disease believe they have to clear their system of all the bugs. I would argue we don't need to clear our system of the bugs. Our body can manage it. We just have to make sure that we bring our
Sure,
microbiome the balance, right? And if we
sure.
and if we and if we if we can manage these bugs, the good and the bad bugs, then in most cases we're not going to be symptomatic, and we don't necessarily have to be testing to make sure we cleared everything. We just have to
Right,
make sure that
right, right.
we're healthy. Because I don't know that you're gonna clear these bugs. I don't know that you're gonna clear Bartonella. I don't know, and I'm not really sure you need to. It's really my question
No,
for your thought. Your
it's
thought.
a viable in fact, I actually have an appointment with him tomorrow to read the results, and I have IVIG, so it'll be a busy day. But my mom and I were talking about that. She's gotten pretty akin to reading the lab results, and so she was like, my thoughts are, because they're hard to read, but she was like, but this is my thoughts are. But she said at this point, your body may be able to take care of that. Before, when I was like unmanageably sick, I was of the belief that, and maybe, I think this whole, Plum Island thing, and I think there are ticks, iterations of ticks that are not of this world. Like, I believe that our bodies can fight organically, what is here are, we through evolution, and we are strong, we are warriors, like, we adapt, we are equipped. I think there are, in some instances, we have maybe not the most organic of these iterations of diseases that,
Well, no, I think if you read Chris Newby's book Bitten, and we've interviewed Chris.
yes,
We did a
great book.
lengthy interview with Chris, which I certainly urge our listeners to
100%. Yes.
to listen to that interview. I actually read Bitten 5 times before I interviewed Chris Newby. I mean, it was an obsession for me. I think she has definitively proven that the strains of certainly Borrelia
Yeah.
were enhanced as part of the bioweapon research, right? So I think that has been definitively proven
I
by
think so too. And, I think some people's eyes start to glaze over, so I always disclaim it a little bit. But, I mean, it's literally, you can see it from Milford. Like, it's right there. And a first responder friend of mine was able, went there. And the, he talks to people, and he was like sort of getting, um, one of the misperception was that the deer swam, thing. It was the birds, like the
well,
geese,
maybe, or maybe it was,
or maybe the deer, but
but Lizzie, it may have been intentionally released, right? I mean,
or it could have been intentionally released.
there are some theories which I think are
I've seen, yeah.
they're being developed
I
that
think I
that
think the more
that
that we're learning,
that
it's
Bergdorfer was a spy, that he sold genetically altered Lyme to a Russian spy,
yes,
and it may have been released, right? And it may have been released right here on Long Island, and it went around the rim of the Long Island Sound, which is, where you live, right? So
right, literally.
it's it's
And
and that's probably a conversation that will make more people anxious than less anxious.
I think so too, but at the same
But
time,
I agree with you, by the way. I agree with you.
I think that, like, if my body could have cleared it, it would have. And so my mom and I had this whole long conversation of, do you think that these infections are manageable naturally? I was born and raised Eastern medicine. I never had antibiotics before this. So my belief is, constitutionally, fundamentally, that in any other circumstance, my answer would have been like, yes, of course your body can, you fuel it and you take care of it, and of course it'll clear it, because accept this. I think that it is not of this world. It's just not. I think
When you say not of this world, you don't mean they're aliens. You
I
mean
don't mean they're aliens. I
it
don't
was
mean that they were
genetically
put here.
altered by
They are
researchers in
genetically altered.
labs as part of a biological weapons project.
It wasn't created naturally. So we can't, in my opinion, in my very humble opinion, and especially 7 illnesses in, treat it naturally. So, like that was sort of my concession of, I have to take 4 antibiotics and an anti-parasitic for, twice a day for,
Yeah.
that was my, okay, this is why.
So Lindsay, let's build this out a little bit more so people are not as anxious as they might be, for the
Sure,
new
of
people who listen
course.
to this podcast, right? So
Sure.
we are born with an immune system, and the innate immune system that we have is essentially software that gets uploaded into our system based on the past experiences that humans have had with different types of germs and during human history. And that ticks have been biting people as long as there have been ticks, that
Yep.
humans have been coming in contact with the Lyme bacteria, the natural Lyme bacteria that you've identified as the of this world,
Of this world.
as long as there are
Not
humans, right?
alien made. You're
So,
right.
the likelihood is very high that we are born with immune software that can manage the traditional Lyme bacteria. We've come in contact with it so often that we are very likely to have been born with the software. So what happened was during the bioweapons research programs is what they were trying to do is they were trying to change the germs so that our innate immune system would not have the software to stop that disease process from taking off, which is why
Beautiful.
you're calling it not of this world, right?
Beautifully said. Yes. Otherwise, I think, and that's what that program was meant to do, target what we can't naturally, what our bodies couldn't naturally handle. And so, I mean, it's a shame, but, you know, eh, when you think about being, I'm in a position now where I've been in the house. This is another different analogy about how our immune systems are stronger. Now my immune system is strong, um, as it can be today. And which is amazing, because I was terrified. I was, very scared to hurt my body more, to make my immune system, my natural immune system, work harder, not taking care of fighting the tick-borne illness. Like if it's distracted, then it's not doing what it's, should be doing at its full degree. So now I'm at this very weird juncture where I have had so much downtime, um, you know, and you get a little comfortable with it. Some of it's behavioral, like I've gotten so okay with being home that because I had to be, that now I'm like, all right, now I need to reintroduce my immune system,
To the
you
world.
know, to the world again. I went to a one thing recently, a holiday party, and I got sick. I was like, okay, I need to introduce my body more.
So help us with what brings folks to this podcast is not only to find models of people who were who went through the same journey that they went through, so they can be validated despite all the gaslighting that we deal with doctors and even some cases our social friends and family.
Yeah,
But we also want to know how you got better,
sure.
because I think anyone watching this, and we will be posting this on YouTube, and anyone listening to this will say, "Hey, this woman is really really articulate, and she sounds very healthy, and she's very vibrant, and she's been on this podcast for well over an hour, and she's very thoughtful." So these are the kinds of things that people are going to want to model.
Sure.
How'd you get here? What from the time that you were diagnosed until now? What are all the things you did, and what order did you do them in?
So, yeah, first I will say, give yourself some grace and kindness, because when you sort of have that realization, you got to the diagnosis, you know what you're facing. You know, be grateful for that, because that's a feat in and of itself. And know that you're going to be in for it a little bit. I think setting that expectation. So my first step was setting that expectation of what this would look like. I knew it wouldn't be I knew it wouldn't be just like, oh, you're gonna just keep getting better. I just knew inherently that that wasn't gonna happen. So my first initial protocol,
But you knew that, Lindsay, because your mom had gone through it just before
I
you.
knew that because my mom had gone through it. Hers seemed very easy, to be honest with you, because I don't know why, but she's a little bit, I don't know why. Hers was like, seemed a little bit more mild. She didn't herx.
Yeah.
She didn't have like that reaction.
Well, and she probably also didn't have congenital Lyme either.
And she had, the two, not to minimize anyone with two illnesses, like
Yeah.
whether you have Lyme proper or you have, a mix of co-infections, everyone is different. It and tick-borne illness manifests and rears its ugly head in a multitude of ways in everyone's body differently. That's one of the things that drives me a little crazy, because I never had a rash. FYI, everybody, I never had that rash. The bullseye rash. I did not feel a flu-like symptom. So I think that one of the things you're gonna stutter stop is, well, I didn't feel that way. So understand that not everyone does. And I think um, I inherently knew, probably from being in health, or in medical fields, and I sort of knew what I was up against a little bit, not even close,
So,
but a
so,
little
so
bit.
you got your mindset right?
I had my mindset right, so that was
And
number one.
it's really where you have to start, right? You have to believe you can heal, and you saw somebody who did heal, so you had a good belief pattern.
A
You
hundred
also
percent.
prepared yourself for the marathon rather than a sprint, so you knew it was going to be a good day and a bad day, two steps forward, one step back. You were preparing for a marathon, right? So those are two, I mean, very, very important pieces of mindset that you were able to build your foundation on. So now
That was vital, vital.
you
And I
you were
visualized a tunnel,
okay.
like literally a long and winding tunnel, visually, like but I knew it wasn't going to be an easy tunnel, but there was light there, and I couldn't see it all the time. So I visualized that.
So you were also in a therapeutic environment. So also had the support of mental health professionals from your prior experiences, right? So you got the mindset piece
I
set,
did.
and we here at Sick Boot Camp recommend to folks when they're going on a journey that is actually the first thing you must do. So you were right on. You were right on with the mindset. You were right on with making sure that your team of professionals included mental health professionals. So tell us what you built from there.
So then we had the conversation of what my protocol would look like, what my medical protocol would look like. And I sort of haphazardly just started, like, all right, this is it. Here we go. This is what I need to do. Take all this stuff. And but I did not expect to get as sick as I did. And I got so sick. I did not anticipate that. And so I don't think, even though I knew it was a possibility, I I I got sick. So
So
I
get into so what treatments were you doing, and how did it
sure.
affect you? How
So
did it affect you to in the way that you're describing as you got sick?
it started with I was on a combo of rifampin,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
rifampin, Bactrim, no, Bactrim, Flagyl, and Mepron.
Okay. So you did a combination of pharmaceuticals.
Combination of
Now,
pharmaceuticals
were you
with
pulsing these? Were you altering? What were you doing?
So every twice a day, those were all of them
Of
twice a
course.
day. Um, Here's the problem, and I want to make this a thing. Um, Whatever you need to do to be compliant, whatever your protocol is, be compliant. Like that's where I messed up. So I in the beginning I was very good. The other thing I want to make sure that I say aloud is if you're not, if you feel like, so with the rifampin, I couldn't handle it. My body couldn't handle it. That was, I learned that quickly. So switch from rifampin to doxy. So I was on, 3 antibiotics and an antiparasitic twice a day, every day. Also with, a really good probiotic. So vitamin D, 10,000, a huge prescription of vitamin D every day for my immune system. Prescription at that point early on. And some other, I was really low in iron, whatever my blood work said, I was really bad in a couple of areas. Vitamin B. My body, I couldn't handle doxy. I I couldn't keep it down unless I had like this ridiculous size meal, and it just became impractical to plan my meals. That I found myself becoming non-compliant. Switched off that
Because of the volume of food you had to eat in order to be
because
able
of
to
the
tolerate the
volume of
toxin.
food,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't get sick. Um, so switched to minocycline, Bactrim, Flagyl, and then eventually switched from the radiation yellow liquid of Mepron to the pill form. Just I had to take 3 of those twice a day.
So now, Lindsay,
Um,
you said that you were getting sick, right? So you're going through all of these different combinations of antibiotics and
yes,
parasitics, and of course, you needed all the antibiotics because you had a number of different bacteria, but
sure,
you also had Babesia. So because
sure,
you had Babesia, you needed the antiparasitic, right? So
right.
now, were you getting sick from the medications, or were you starting to herx? I mean, what was happening there, and were you prepared for the herx reactions, and what were they like?
So, okay, so that was the worst. So I was getting sick because of the doxy, like so the
You,
antibiotics,
you
but
couldn't tolerate all the antibiotics.
right, but and in the beginning I was doing a pretty good job of having my hearty meal, and timing it out in the beginning when I was like, okay, here we go, starting this journey. It just so happened that first week of this protocol, and I was being good, taking my 3 antibiotics and my anti-parasitic. That I was my boyfriend at the time lived in Pennsylvania, so I was drove 6 hours, and I'm there, and then as soon as I get there, I was like, I don't feel right. I don't Something's wrong. I was not prepared. I expected herxing sooner. I thought that this was going to happen sooner when I started taking my meds. This is about a week in, you know, twice a day. And I was not prepared for the level of sickness that happened. I mean, within hours of that, me being getting there and being like, I don't feel right. Thank goodness I took that week off and I was staying there for a week. But what happened after, I was in so much pain, and it wasn't muscular. It wasn't just muscular. It wasn't just, I mean, it was to the bone. I've never felt that much pain. And I've was a burn victim. I had 3rd-degree burns on my face, and still the herxing was way worse. It was everything. And with that, so thankfully, this boyfriend at the time, and I give him so much credit, because instead of being like, okay, yeah, you don't feel good because of whatever this herx thing, you know, because when you look it up and you're like, you have syphilis. He was, which is also a thing that happens when you start being, treated for syphilis, by the way. But so if anyone looks at you weird, that's why. But he jumped in, and he was like, he started looking into how to help that. I couldn't move physically, my body. He had to carry me, up and downstairs from that first morning, he realized he detoxing was important. And that's basically the Herxheimer reaction, is when you become treated and there's die off, there's mass bad cell die off, and your body is toxic, but it's painful to a level that I was not ready for.
So
No.
let's talk about that. So what's happening is die-off means you had all kinds of bugs in your system, and you've already defined that you were suffering from at least 5 different types of bacteria and parasites.
Sure.
And what was happening is the combination of all these drugs you were taking were killing those bugs, but they were killing the bugs at such a pace that your body couldn't rid itself of all of these bugs. And now your immune system is now attacking these dead bugs, and you are becoming toxic, right?
Sure. Sure. And I expected, I don't know what I expected, but it was painful. It was so painful. And you feel heavy, like, trudging through mud. That's what everything feels like. And so he did some research, and he dropped me in the morning, while I was there, into a jacuzzi sauna with the jets full blast. Sit here, so he looked into it. So, and that's how I started every morning while I was there. He had put me in, it was so painful.
It was helping you to use your largest detox organ, which is your skin, as a vehicle
Again,
for
which
getting.
was very smart, very
Yeah,
smart.
very smart.
And for that week that I was there, where it was really bad and really painful. Now, I experienced that reaction for not to that level of pain, but for a while, weeks,
So Lindsay, now were your doctors walking back your medications so that you can now tolerate the diet, and then increasing, like, because generally what we hear from folks who have been on this journey is that detox, when you're herxing to that extent, what you have to do is, of course, you have to open up your detox pathways,
sure,
so that you're getting rid of these bugs, so that it's less painful. But generally what that means is that the treatment is too aggressive, that you have to walk the
sure.
treatment back a little bit, so that you don't have all that die off, because it is very dangerous to become that toxic.
It
And,
is,
and
and
the
I
people
didn't
who
know
push it,
that
the
at the
people who push
time.
it too hard, in many cases, find themselves, getting very, very sick. And we've had some experiences. One of our favorite guests is a fellow named Nick Turinsky, who was this tough basketball player, tough guy from a tough neighborhood. And when he got sick, he was gonna get this out of his system and run.
Sure,
And Nick got to the point where he was wheelchair bound because he was too aggressive, and he wasn't working with healthcare professionals that knew how to back
sure.
down the level of treatment appropriately. So tell me what happened with you. I mean, you were blessed to find
So
somebody who cared enough about you to do some research, came up with a solution to help you to
he
detox.
did.
And as a result of that, that helped you with the level of pain. But what were your doctors doing? Were they saying, "Oh, it's too aggressive"?
So I sort of I took it, and the same way that I tried to take the rifampin or take the doxy, because, and in retrospect, and I knew, not at that moment, but after I started looking into it, I knew at some point that it was dangerous. Like, that was a dangerous thing to play with. I started really looking into, detox, dry brushing. Then but I didn't communicate that to my doctor. He was pissed. I did after. He was mad, but I wanted to and this is sort of the problem with being with very tenacious family members, like, because I was like, you'll take this, like, you need to slow down. And that is not good advice that I would want the community to know. I want you to know that if you're uncomfortable, it occurred to me only later, that why wasn't I just vocal about it? Like
Well,
why?
but I mean, I think you should show yourself some grace. And look, I think you're giving great advice, right? And I think part of the advice you're giving is you have to recognize that your relationship with your doctor is a partnership, and in that
So
partnership,
important.
you have to communicate, right? It's because the doctor can only help you as much as you're giving the doctor feedback, and by hiding this from your doctor, you weren't serving yourself well, right? So
No,
great advice. I mean,
thank you.
that is great advice. Great advice. But there's another piece of this, of course, which is your doctor also has to communicate with you and let you know, hey, you're going to Herx if we push this too hard, and
Agreed.
and if you start to feel this
Agreed.
response,
Ag-
you have to let me know, right? You have to let me know right
Agree. A
away so
hundred
that
percent.
we can now adjust things.
A
So there's
hundred percent.
two
It's,
ways.
in fact, it's the only time in this whole experience where I say to my mom, I'm kind of still surprised that he didn't, you know, make that like a known possibility. Like,
Well,
I'm still a little surprised on that one.
Lindsay, look, and I'm not entirely surprised. My guess is that this doctor, and I'm not going to ask you to mention his name,
Sure.
my guess is he himself did not suffer from Lyme disease. And that's why I don't think he was probably as good at preparing you for this as some of the other doctors. Like one of the arguments I make to folks is if you can find a doctor who went through the journey themselves
Sure.
and then they're on the journey, that gives you a huge advantage, in part because they can communicate with you in a way that a doctor who didn't go on the journey could. But even more importantly, they know how to push you and when to push you and when not.
When?
So, for example, we interviewed Dr. Casey Kelly, who's one of our favorite folks.
Yep.
And Dr. Kelly, out of Chicago, she was a Lyme, right? She had
Yep.
Lyme disease while she was, a child and through medical school, and ultimately she's one of the top practitioners. And I
Yes.
think Dr. Kelly really knows how to push and how not to push, and when to say
Sure.
something not because she went on the journey herself, right? So she can prepare you better for a Herx, right?
Right. Right. Even
And
my mom, I think a part of it was like my mom didn't have that sort of react, like, in fact, she was like, I always joke with her. My mom's like, "What? I didn't have it like that." I was fine. And I was like, "Yeah, were you? Yeah, cool." So
good
like,
for
I
you, Mom.
think, yeah, good for you. That's great. And so I think that and I tend to do this. I do tend to do this. Do not recommend. I tend to try to stay the course, push, push, push. I don't recommend it. In fact, when I brought up being sick to the point of non-compliance, when I was taking my antibiotics, my doctor was like, "Oh, Lindsey, we just switch it." And I was like, "Oh," and I felt so silly. Like, why didn't I just communicate that? Like, duh.
But that's another thing I want to highlight with you, right? I mean, look, the growing up in a suck it up culture
Right.
will generally serve you well in life, right? I
Sure.
mean, like, life is going to throw you a lot of curveballs, and you can't wilt every time a curveball
100%.
surfaces, right? But
Sure.
there is this place where we do not serve ourselves well when we're raised in the suck it up culture. So you're from this tough Lebanese culture. You have all kinds of tough people around you who are gritty people, and I think that's part of your charm, right? You are a tough, gritty person. The problem is that you were pushing it so hard that you put your health in jeopardy, right?
And risked non-compliance, by so
Right,
my dad keeps telling me now, Lindsey, just raise your hand, just raise your hand. And I realize, I'm like, and he's like, why didn't you? And I was like, I don't know, like, it's so silly in retrospect. So communicate
well,
with your doctor.
yeah, no, and it's an important part of the lesson that we're now sharing
It
with folks,
is.
that when you're going on this journey, herxing is a part of it, and it's a signal that you're killing, and you want to herx a little bit so that
You
you know that,
do.
so that it's working, but you can't herx to the point where you need your boyfriend to pick you up and drop you
No, it's
into
it's
into
not a
a
competition of who can hurt the
no.
work. No, it's not.
And remember, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And even though you were a sprinter,
I was.
you really had to, you have to walk this back and understand that this is a long journey, and it really has to be slow. So one of the things we talk about here at Tick Boot Camp is prehabilitation, meaning getting yourself ready before you go through the process of killing the bugs, right?
Sure.
And we strongly recommend that you engage in behaviors like movement, right? Because movement is part of detox.
Sure.
Like making sure that you're getting sleep, because the way your brain detoxes is during the sleep phase, right? Uh,
Yes.
making sure that your diet is locked in, so that you're not adding to the toxic load, because there are all kinds of toxins on the foods that we're eating. And we have to make sure that when we're going through this process of killing off all these bugs and having all these bugs now come to our system, that we're not adding to the toxification burden with the different foods that we're eating and the stuff that's either added to it or sprayed on it, or um, another another observation about the way that you were helped medically, was that it seems to me that that you were sort of dropped into the killing phase too early, that you weren't really given an opportunity to get yourself ready for the battle, right?
Sure.
We don't send police officers into the streets until they've gone through
They're
through their
training.
training. We don't send a soldier out into
Sure.
her battle until she goes through boot camp and basic training. And
Right.
quite frankly, we can't send people into a Lyme disease battle without
True.
getting them ready for it. And I think another place you may have been failed is that you weren't given an opportunity to prehabilitate.
Yeah.
A part of
I think
rehabilitation is also the mindset piece, which you did have locked.
right, I did. And there was one other one that I think that we did. What was it? Not the movement, not the food. Oh, food toxins. Um oh man, I forgot. Derp. I forgot there was
So
one
for
factor.
us, it's mindset, it's food, it's
Yep.
movement, it's sleep.
Oh, so sleep was definitely, so my sleep journey preceded on purpose my tick-borne journey. So but he did ask those questions. My my mom, bought this, you're gonna, so my mom for 4 years, twice a day, every day, texted me for my meds, right? Like, take your meds, take your meds. At one point I sort of had to resign basically everything over to my mom and say, I'm not capable of of really much. I can work. Everything outside of that, I raise my hand, raise your hand and say, I am not capable. Now, not everyone has that, right? Like, not everyone has someone who is committed to this journey. It took other people in my life a lot longer to get on board. But as far as the pre part, I definitely I think there was more concern and shock of, oh shoot. Oh, the other, I forgot. I had Lyme carditis. So there was a very large concern, like a pretty immense concern. There was an arrhythmia and my heart rate sleeping was in the 164 area during sleep. And so there was like sort of like this, like, oh my God, like we need to like, but to your point, it's important to know where you're going, so that you can get there
You're getting
right.
yourself ready, right? Because I think your herxing
Oof.
your toxification issues could have, some of them could have been averted had you been given the opportunity to
Agree.
rehab,
Get right.
and then go into the
Oh, I know
treatment
what I
phase.
wanted to bring up. I'm so sorry, but mold. To your
Oh
point,
yeah, yeah.
your environment, your environment, because you made me think of it when you're talking about the food, because we did address that, and more so as the journey went on. Like, he knew what I was like willing to concede and not, my doctor. So
Well, thank you, because that is a part of rehab, a prehab as well, which is you have to check your environment and you have to make sure that
uh
you're living in a moldy environment.
100, which I midway through, 3 years in, or at some point, there was a plateau. Better, numbers are better, numbers are better, numbers are better, numbers are not better. Lindsey feels kind of the same, legs are, and at one point, inherently, I knew, like, I just knew in my soul that the home I was in, there was mold. It only made sense. And so I asked him, and I was like, but I could have asked him so much earlier. I knew, and I knew. So again, this is my stuff that I brought into this journey. I would recommend being more communicative. If you think something, if you see something, say something.
Yeah,
So
but also, Lindsey, I mean, I want you to show yourself some grace here. You also want to make sure you're working with a doctor that's helping you to communicate.
sure,
Right? In most cases,
yes,
in most cases, when people are not communicating, it's because they're not given an opportunity to communicate. It's like, when somebody lies to you, they're only lying to you because
right,
they're creating an environment where they have to lie to you, right?
yeah, no, 100%,
So
100%.
that's really
And me not telling my mom did me no favors either, because she was doing a lot of this communicating at first, because words were not easy for me in the beginning. But so I learned that mold is a thing. It's a huge factor. Your
huge.
body's going to be busy, again, busy, trying to rid itself of this foreign nonsense, and it will not do you any favor. So that's another one. Check your environment before you start, because otherwise it doesn't even make sense to start
Mold will
before.
add to your toxic load, and mold
Thank you.
mold is immunosuppressive, and yeah, and it is something that we do have to, in most cases, test our environment and get that in check before we start using all these heavy, pharmaceuticals.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
So how do things go for you after all the pharmaceuticals? What was the next step in your journey?
So the next step was, all right, now I'm compliant, I've communicated, I'm compliant. I realized that, oh my God, I feel better, like I can think clearer, so then I start seeing these changes that I didn't even know so I'm like, okay, now I can do this. I can do this. What I will say is just be compliant, like I'm the worst always, like I've always been annoying about taking.
Matt is joining us, but yes, and I promise you I'll let him say hello, but say with the thought. So
Sure.
we're
Sure. So I oh gosh, Matt distracted. Oh my God,
right,
Matt, you
no, so
distracted.
you're saying you become more compliant, you're now
So
moving
I came more
to
compliant, and I started to feel like, oh my God, I can see this happening. The problem is you get a little cocky, I think, depending on how long your journey is. I didn't expect mine to be this long, but I definitely lengthened it by my lack of compliance and sticking to the protocol, and doing the things that I should have been doing. Um, I told my mom that she didn't have to do that every day, and then I probably shouldn't have, but like, so I realized I had to dig back in. I lengthened the process, or
Well,
the
but
journey.
let's talk about that, right? Because I know you when you started this journey, you began with understanding that it was a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
You have a sprinter's personality.
I do.
It is your personality, and athletically, that's what you were attracted
Yep.
to. And despite thinking you were ready for a marathon, it really isn't your personality, and it's not who you were athletically. So you really were trying to sprint, right? But it's okay to take a break from treatment at times, right? It's okay to allow the journey to be what the journey is supposed to be. It's okay for your body to adjust to what it's supposed to adjust to, and it's okay to show yourself that grace. So please don't be so hard on yourself. I mean,
I know.
it was
I
it was
am a
okay
lot.
to do that on that pace, and it's okay for all of our listeners
It
to,
is.
if their body is saying to them, you need to take a break from treatment because you went too hard and
Yep.
beat us up a little bit too much, then we're going to take a break, and that's okay that you did that. It's
It
really
is. It is. And, then when your body's ready, you'll know, you'll want to eat better, take care of yourself. At this point, when I was like further in, I started being way more conscientious of dyes, in food and additives, and my skincare changed. This is the biggest organ on our body, and what are we putting into it? So as I started feeling better, I had the wherewithal to start shifting my behaviors or my buying behaviors or my regimen to aid this process holistically as a
So that
whole.
that included makeups that you're using?
And that included makeup. I switched all, like I started being very conscientious about what I, looking at the formulation and, the, because I would just buy whatever, like it didn't matter. Like, not saying everything at the drugstore is bad, but my level of forethought into the products or the, skincare or makeup or cosmetics went from, there are still some things that I'm like, nope, hard no, need that, thank you. But like as far as like my base of like what I put on my skin first, it is a very serious, like I take that very seriously. And food dye, that's another, another one. So I started looking at ingredients way more. Hydrating, sleep, you want to take care of your body all of a sudden now that you start to feel like you are getting better. You want to make that better, Um, then IVIG. So at 5 years ish in, 4 years in, um, my it it was very clear that the only way to move forward, like I sort of maxed out where I
So,
was.
so were you on antibiotics for this 4 or 5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And the numbers were getting better. They were getting better. They were getting better. And then, and the other thing that I do is I regularly test for the nerve conduction, like the ECT,
Okay.
ECT, with the neurologist who it is, knows my immunologist. And so we regularly, every 9 months or so, 6 to 9 months, do that. The numbers stopped, like they stopped at that point. So at this point, IVIG was needed to be introduced.
So you plateaued after about 4 or 5 years, and now you and your doctors believe that it's time to give your immune system a boost.
Yes,
All right, so
it
talk to us about
was.
that. Talk to us about what they told you about IVIG,
Yep,
and how it would enhance your immune system, uh,
sure.
and what were your thoughts about whether you wanted to go forward with that protocol?
Sure. So in the beginning of the whole journey, I might have been 3 years in, maybe ish before IVIG. I might have overestimated. So it my doctor spoke about it early on as a possibility, not like you need to, but like as a possibility. Let's see where we're at. But he knew that I had mobility issues, and at that point, and it was significant. Like the the diagnosis could have been, like I knew it wasn't this, but was CIDP, so the blah 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 polyneuropathy, demyelation in your legs. That was the diagnosis technically for the insurance company. So I knew that that was a possibility down the road, but we started with the antibiotics. And then we got to a point where it was sort of like, all right, we've demolded, we've demolded, we've antibiotic, we've progressed. Now your leggies aren't better. You've seen a lot of improvement. I was really worried about losing my mobility, was my big concern. I had a local kid who I grew up with, diagnosed with Parkinson's, young, in his 20s, wheelchair bound, later finds out he has babesiosis, knows he needs IVIG, and can't get it in time. And he died. And like, and I had known that. And I said, I was like, please don't let me lose my legs. Like, I felt like that would just be bad for me, obviously, of course. But so we start that 2.5 year jam.
No,
Two and a
the jam is, so let's explain that. So the jam is
Sure,
that IVIG is a very expensive treatment protocol.
it is.
Insurance companies are hesitant to pay for it.
They are.
and you have to go through a very rigorous process to demonstrate that you are so immunocompromised that this would be a necessary treatment. So
Correct.
that
Beautifully said.
jam is you were trying to get approval
Approved.
for the treatment.
Approval from the insurance company. So that that was anxiety provoking. At that point,
Which of
as this
course is immunosuppressive and making you sicker.
right and right. So and knowing that, at this point, okay, we're now more time in, we clearly need, my body clearly needs this injection of IVIG. In fact, it wasn't, so that's when things really started to get beautiful. That's when things real, I'll never forget being, you know, in nature again, like 4 months in, and feeling like I can do this, like I can be in the world again. That's when it really took off. Granted, my insurance company kicked me off after 4 months, alleged non-payment, which wasn't true. But so we switched insurance companies. Thank God it didn't take another 2.5 years. It did take another 3 months. So a little back to square one. But from that point forward, now it's been, probably 4 years. It has been, there's a video that I have of me in the beginning, me just diagnosed, trying to stand on one of my legs, and I can't. And it's shaking, and you can see like the stabilization, and you can see all of the little stabilizing muscles, trying, and I can't stand on one leg. And then me 4 years in, and I'm belly dancing on one leg, and like, oh my God. In fact, I showed it to the neurologist, the lady, and one of his like team members, and she cried. She was like, she said to me, she was like, from the first day that you walked in here to today, you look like a different person. And I was like, you remember? And she was
So
like, girl,
So Lindsay, we are getting towards the end of our time.
sure.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. So
Thank you.
let's tie it together. Before
Sure.
we've come back to belly dancing, which is the
We
present
have come
type of
back to belly
conversation, right?
dancing.
Full circle. So, are you still currently taking the IVAG? Have
I
you been
am,
consistently
and
for 4 years?
I am. I'm at the end of so basically right now at the end of IVIG, um it's now that my symptoms are better, physicality, it's really down to my nerve reactivity. So we're making sure that there's progress. Everybody's on board with whatever you need kind of mentality. My wonderful nurse comes here. She'll be here tomorrow. Doris, shout out Doris, and she is a treasure. So, and there's support. I would really recommend, if you are in a place where there's an organization, where there's a group, insurance, finding out if there are, sometimes there are people. If there's a broker, if there's an insurance broker, sometimes there are wonderful people that will fight for you. Um, and that is a thing that a lot of people didn't know. I didn't know until I needed it. So if you can call your insurance and ask them, or a third party, sometimes maybe even, I don't know. We had a broker at the dealership and they were like, wait, we'll just call them. They fought for me. They did. They
Oh, that's
fought for
awesome.
me.
That is, yeah, it's awesome. You never know where the angels are going to appear.
I thank her all the time. I thank her all the time. I wouldn't be here the way that I am. I couldn't show up for you like I can if it weren't for, her name is Dina, and she's a saint.
So
So
let's bring it back to the place where we started, which was the belly dancing, right?
sure,
And how important movement is to your health, and how important now this, and we talked about how important it was for you
sure.
to find yourself and connect with your roots and connect with your culture and all of those important pieces. Talk about the importance of movement and how, the movement piece, including the detox and now all of the neurological benefits that you're getting, are enhancing your health as well.
One of the most important things that I've learned is that if you're moving, I mean, physics tells us an object in motion stays in motion. And I think that from being sedentary, and for those of us out there that have been in a situation where they're pretty much bed bound to the point where you can like start doing things again, you never want to stop. So you go from this place, but you realize that your body needs to learn how to do stuff again. And it takes a little time. Stabilizing muscles need to learn how to stabilize. Like, you don't think about these things when you're a child growing up because it just happens naturally. You gain strength. So movement is healing. I find differences in my posture every day, or, how can I help heal my body? What's my body alignment doing for myself? Because if that's not right, why am I doing all this other stuff? And so, just being able to be outside and feel like I can hike is healing. Hiking and belly dancing are, to me, they're the same thing. Doing something that I couldn't do before that I can do now, and helping my body know that I think a part of it is an awakening. Like, you're having this sort of awakening of your physicality. So movement to me is so important. My best friend gets really excited about this part of it. She thinks that this part of it, the movement part, practicing belly dancing and expressing the story of how it came to be, is the most important, because there are a lot of people out there that you know don't know that they can be okay. And they can be okay, but it's the way that I express it is in that movement that I couldn't do 3 years ago. So to me, it's like that full circle. My doctor gets really excited. In fact, my mom cries every time she sees me belly dancing because she's just so relieved. So for me, it's like the butterfly moment, like when you come out of the little crystalline and you can feel within yourself, and you can also balance and do all of the things, but you can't stop doing that, like, ever. I think the strongest people in the world stay that way from movement and stretching and expressing and doing stuff that makes them feel good.
I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. So, Lindsey, we really enjoyed this very powerful and beautiful conversation. You are a beautiful human being, and I
Thank
thank
you.
you for being so vulnerable with me and with our listeners. And where can folks find you on Instagram
Sure.
and
Well,
and where to
thank
communicate?
you, first of all, for doing, like, pouring into Matt and pouring into the community with Matt. And I'm grateful that you took your personal time to do that, like, out of your life, and thank your wife also and your children, because they were probably like, what is he doing? But anyway, you can find me at on the Instagram at L as in Lindsay, M as in Margaret, Shaker, like salt, LM Shaker. Um, uh, LM Shaker is the Instagram. That's where I mostly, I do belly dancing. Sometimes I do satirical, like, I can't believe this is happening, and I feed squirrels every day that I name.
You call them like tree puppies or something on your
Tree
Instagram?
puppies. Yeah, they're all named. They wait for me. They're very cool. And there's a bird. Wingding is the bird's name.
All right. Well, thank you. You're absolute pleasure to interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Heart hands.